The first time I knocked on her door, I only wanted Wi-Fi. I was not looking for trouble, not looking for anything romantic. But the second she opened that door in a dark green bathrobe and said, "You won't want to go back to your place," I knew my life had just turned a corner I was not ready for. My name is Theo. I am 25 and I live alone in a small apartment in a quiet corner of Tacoma, Washington. I work remote IT support, the kind of guy who spends all day on calls with people who still think the internet button is a thing. I help them clear browser cache, update software, reset routers. It is not a dream job, but it pays my rent and keeps my fridge from being empty. My apartment still looks like I just moved in. There are boxes stacked in the corner that I keep telling myself I will unpack soon. I have a second-hand couch, a chipped coffee table I found on Craigslist, and a cheap lamp that makes the room look more yellow than warm. No TV, just my laptop on the table and my running shoes by the door. It is a half-built life, and most days I feel like a half-built person. 3 months before I moved here, my ex Sarah walked out. She said we wanted different things. I think what she really meant was she wanted a 5-year plan and a guy in a press shirt, and I am still figuring out what I am doing next week. After she left, I packed up what I had, found the cheapest decent place I could, and told myself I would focus on work and nothing else for a while. No big feelings. No new problems. Just routine. Then came that Friday. It started simple. I had a full day of remote calls. Tickets piling up. Clients sending annoyed emails because their inbox would not sync. Right when I needed my internet most, my own connection died. The provider had messed up my setup, and the router blinked like it was mocking me. I tried to tether my laptop to my phone, but the signal in my apartment was awful. Pages loaded slow. Calls dropped, and I could almost feel my job slipping through my fingers. By 5 in the afternoon, I was pacing in my living room, my laptop open on the table with error messages all over the screen. I had a headache from stress and way too much coffee. I needed Wi-Fi. Not tomorrow. Now. My building is small, mostly older tenants or young couples. People keep to themselves. I had not really met anyone, but I knew there was a woman in the apartment next to mine, 204. I had seen her in the hallway a few times. Dark hair, sharp eyes, always dressed clean and simple like she was on her way to a meeting, even on weekends. We had traded quick nods in the elevator, nothing more. I had heard bits of gossip from the neighbor across the hall about how the woman in 204 was private, hard to read, maybe cold. I did not care about the rumors. I just needed a network to log into. So I grabbed my phone, took a breath, and stepped into the hallway. It smelled like laundry detergent and old carpet. Her doormat was plain and simple. No welcome sign. Just a dark gray rectangle, neat and straight. I knocked. Not too loud. Not too soft. I was ready to say, "Hi, I am your neighbor. Can I borrow your Wi-Fi for a bit?" And then run back to my side of the wall. The door opened. And there she was. She stood barefoot in a dark green bathrobe that tied at her waist, the fabric clinging just enough to show the lines of her body. Her hair was wet, like she had just stepped out of the shower, strands sticking to her neck. Drops of water slid down to her collarbone and disappeared into the robe. Her skin was still damp, a little flushed from the heat. She looked right at me. No surprise, no embarrassment, no flinch. Her eyes were steady, pale and sharp, like she was used to people showing up at her door at odd times, and she had seen much worse. My brain stalled. Every simple line I had prepared died in my throat. Then she spoke. Her voice was low, smooth, with a rough edge that made it sound like she had smoked a lot or shouted at life more than once. "You knocked on the right door," she said, leaning one shoulder against the frame. "Come on in. You won't want to go back to your place." For a second, I thought I misheard her. The words hit me like a punch and a dare at the same time. My pulse jumped. I clutched my phone, like it was my anchor. I just need your Wi-Fi password," I said finally, feeling my face heat up. "My internet is down, and I have work to finish." She tilted her head, studying me, a faint smile pulling at the corner of her mouth like she knew exactly how flustered I was and was enjoying it. "Sure," she said, "but come in." It is easier to show you. Every part of me said, keep this simple, stay in the hallway, do not walk into a stranger's place when she is in a bathrobe. But my feet moved anyway. I stepped inside and she closed the door behind me with a soft click that sounded louder in my head than it should have. Her apartment felt like a different world. Warm golden light from a couple of lamps filled the place, soft and calm. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with books that looked old and loved. A vintage Nikon camera sat on a side table next to a pile of black and white photos. I saw deserts, ruined buildings, tired faces, streets I could not place. The air smelled like coffee and something floral, maybe her soap or perfume. A slow jazz track played from a speaker in the corner, smooth trumpet cutting through the quiet. I realized how bright and alive her place felt compared to my half-unpacked box cave next door. She walked to a wooden dining table where a thin laptop sat open. "Use mine," she said, already reaching for a coffee pot on the counter. "The network is more stable than whatever you have going on over there." "Thanks," I said, moving closer. "I am Theo. I'm in 203. "Eleanor Monroe," she replied without looking up. Then she turned, handed me a mug, and added, "Call me Eleanor. No need for formal stuff." Her fingers brushed mine as I took the coffee. The touch was brief, but it sent a buzz up my arm that I did not want to admit I felt. I sat at the table, pulled her laptop toward me, and logged into my email. My heart was still racing, and not from work this time. I tried to focus on the inbox full of angry clients, but I could feel her presence across the room. Not heavy, just there. I stole a glance at the photos on her wall, at the camera, at the piles of notebooks. "You a photographer?" I asked, needing to say something that did not sound like, "I cannot stop staring at you." "Used to be," she said. Her tone was clipped but not cold. "Now I write." "Edit. Stay quiet." She did not offer more, and I did not push. I had already heard the whispers from the hallway, the stories about a war reporter. A husband who never came back from Syria. A woman who moved here and shut most of the world out. Looking at her now, I believed every word. There was a depth in her eyes, a kind of tired strength that does not come from normal life. I finished the most urgent emails, my fingers moving slower than they needed to. When I finally closed the laptop, it felt like I was ending something I did not want to stop. "Thank you," I said, standing. "I will get my own internet working soon. I will not bother you again." She leaned back in her chair, that faint smile back on her lips. "It is no bother, Theo," she said. "I do not mind the company." Her gaze held mine a little longer than felt normal, and I felt that pull again, like there was a step in front of me I did not see yet. I walked back to my apartment, her words echoing in my head. "You won't want to go back to your place." I closed my own door behind me and looked around at the dim light, the boxes, the silence. For the first time since I moved in, my place did not feel like a safe blank space. It felt cold, empty, and she was right, I did not want to be there. The next morning I woke up in my own apartment, but my head was still in hers. I lay on my old second-hand couch staring at the ceiling, replaying the way Eleanor had opened the door in that green bathrobe, the way she moved around her apartment like she was in control of every inch of it, the way she had said, "I don't mind the company," like it meant more than just Wi-Fi. My place felt even smaller in the daylight, boxes stacked in the corner, blank walls, a dead router with its sad little blinking light. I checked my phone. The provider had sent another "we're working on it" message. No timeline, no fix. My first thought was not, how will I work? My first thought was, can I knock on her door again without looking desperate? Quote, I told myself it was just about my job. Rent does not pay itself. So I made coffee, threw on a clean hoodie, grabbed my laptop and stood in front of my door for a full minute, arguing with myself. Then I sighed, locked up, and walked those 10 steps down the hall. Her door looked exactly the same as yesterday. Plain mat, clean frame. I raised my hand and knocked, lighter this time. The kind of knock that said, I can leave if this is weird. The door opened. No bathrobe today. Eleanor stood there in a fitted black sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked more like someone ready to work, but there was still that calm control in the way she held herself. Her eyes flicked over me, taking in the laptop under my arm. "Back already?" she said. Her voice had a teasing edge. "Your internet's still on strike?" "Yeah," I said, lifting the laptop as proof. "Thought I'd ask if I could borrow your Wi-Fi again, just for a bit. I'll be quick." She stepped aside without hesitation. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Quote, I walked in, and the same warm wave hit me. Lamps on, soft jazz floating from the speaker, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. Her place felt lived in, like every object had a story. Books piled on the coffee table, a notebook open, pen resting across the pages. That old Nikon camera catching the morning light. It was like stepping into a quiet movie scene. She already had 2 mugs set out. She poured coffee and slid one toward me at the table. "Black, right?" she asked. I blinked. "Yeah, you remembered." "I pay attention," she said simply, then sat on the sofa with a book in her hands, one leg tucked under her. "Work away." "I'll pretend you're not here." "Pretty sure my typing ruins that," I said, opening my laptop. She gave the smallest smile and lowered her eyes to her book. For the first hour, we fell into a strange, soft rhythm. I answered emails, fixed tickets, typed notes. She read quietly, turning pages at a slow, steady pace. The jazz wrapped around the silence, making it feel full instead of awkward. At one point, she said without looking up, "You're quiet for someone in tech." "Is that a stereotype?" I asked, glancing over. "Every guy the first ever met who worked with computers loved to talk about their code," she replied. Non-stop, like it was a religion. I laughed. "Maybe I'm bad at talking about myself. Or maybe I don't want to bore you." She closed her book halfway, eyes meeting mine. "I hate small talk," she said. "If you don't know what to say, read something." She nodded at a worn book on the table. The cover was bent, the pages soft from use. "Roomy. Out loud," she added. "Saves us both from the silence." I picked it up, feeling suddenly self-conscious, and flipped to a random page. I started reading. The words were simple but heavy, about love and longing and being pulled towards someone without knowing why. My voice sounded stiff at first, but as I went on, it loosened. The room felt closer. The jazz, the candles from last night still faint in the air, the way she watched me with her head tilted a little to the side. When I paused, she said, "Not bad. You sound like you mean it." I did not know if she was talking about the poem or something else. As the days passed and my internet stayed dead, visiting her became routine. I knocked. She let me in. Coffee showed up in front of me before I even sat down. Sometimes she worked on her laptop. Sometimes she typed on an old typewriter that clacked loud in the quiet room. Sometimes she just sat with a pen and notebook, staring out the window like she was trying to pull words out of the sky. I started noticing small details. She had a tiny scar along her jaw, like a faint white line. She tapped her pen against her bottom lip when she was thinking. She only wore one piece of jewelry, a thin silver bracelet on her left wrist, dull with age but never removed. One afternoon, the light in her kitchen kept flickering. It flashed once, twice, then buzzed in a way that made my teeth hurt. "Want me to look at that?" I asked, pushing my chair back. "You don't have to play handyman," she said, but she was already standing up, grabbing a step stool. "But I won't stop you." Quote, I took the stool from her. "Please don't get on this. If you fall, I'll have to explain to someone that I killed my neighbor trying to fix a light." She rolled her eyes, but there was warmth there. I climbed up, tightened the bulb, checked the fixture. Easy fix. "You're handy for an IT guy," she said, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "Most people your age call the landlord for everything." "I'm full of surprises," I said. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. The air between us shifted just a little, like the room had taken a breath. For a moment, we were close. Too close. The smell of her perfume, soft and floral, wrapped around me. My chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with electricity. She turned away first, moving back to the table, and the spell broke. Bits of her past slipped out in pieces. One morning I noticed a photo on the shelf. It was her, younger, standing in a dusty street with that same camera around her neck. A man stood beside her, arms slung over her shoulder, both of them smiling into hard sunlight. "That's Syria," she said quietly when she saw me looking, before everything changed. I had heard the rumors from the neighbor down the hall. War zones. A husband killed in a bombing. A career that ended overnight. Seeing the picture made it real. I stopped listening to certain songs after my ex left, I admitted, not sure why I was telling her. They felt like they belonged to her. She nodded slowly. "I stopped taking photos after my husband died," she said. "It felt like stealing moments that weren't mine anymore." The way she said it made my throat tight. There was no drama in her voice, just tired truth. We let the jazz cover the rest. By the end of that first week, I had spent more hours in Eleanor's apartment than my own. I started bringing pastries from a bakery down the street. She teased me about choosing the sweetest ones. "You're going to destroy my diet," she said, biting into a croissant, flakes falling onto her sweater. "You look fine to me," I blurted out. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a second, something moved there. Then she laughed it off, but I could not forget that look. On paper, it was simple, a young guy using his neighbor's Wi-Fi while his own line was down. But it did not feel simple, not when she smiled at me over the rim of her mug, not when our fingers brushed passing a book or a plate, not when I lay on my couch at night and realized I was not thinking about my ex anymore. I was thinking about the woman next door. The war reporter turned ghost neighbor, the one who opened the door in a bathrobe and said I would not want to go back to my place. She was right. And every day that passed made it harder to pretend this was only about the internet. It was a Saturday night, almost 2 weeks since I first knocked on Eleanor's door, when the power went out. One second I was in my apartment, staring at my laptop and a half-written email. The next second everything went black. No hum from the fridge. No streetlights leaking through the blinds, just darkness, and the sound of rain hitting the windows harder than before. I sat there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, listening to the storm. My phone screen lit up my lap when I checked it. 5% battery, no Wi-Fi, no power, no clue how long it would last. The first person I thought of was her. I grabbed my flashlight from under the sink, the cheap kind with a dim beam, but better than nothing. I stepped into the hallway. It was darker out there than in my apartment. No backup lights, just the faint gray outline of doors in both directions. I walked the 10 steps to 204 and knocked. For a second I wondered if she was asleep or if I was being stupid. Then the door opened. She stood there in the doorway, lit only by a soft, moving glow behind her. Candles. She wore a loose gray sweater and black leggings, her hair down around her shoulders, a little messy, like she had been running her hands through it. The candlelight made her look different, softer, younger, and older at the same time. "Theo," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a warmth in it. "Checking to see if the old lady next door survived the apocalypse?" "Something like that," I said, lifting the flashlight slightly. "Power's out on my side. Thought I'd make sure you were okay." Her eyes flicked to the flashlight, then back to me. "I have candles," she said. "But you have batteries. Come in. We can combine our resources." I stepped inside, and she closed the door behind me. Her apartment looked different in the dark. The lamps were off, but half a dozen candles were scattered across the kitchen counter and coffee table, their flames dancing in little pools of light. Shadows moved on the walls. A portable speaker sat near the sink, playing soft jazz at a low volume. It felt like the world had shrunk down to this one room. "Whole block's out," she said, going back to the kitchen. "I called the building manager. He said the city is working on it." "Been through this before?" I asked, leaning against the counter. She pulled 2 cushions from the corner and dropped them on the floor by the cabinets. Then she slid down to sit on one of them. Back against the lower cupboards, she nodded at the other cushion. "Sit," she said. "The chairs feel strange with no lights." Quote. I sat next to her, my shoulder a few inches from hers, the cabinet cool against my back. The candles cast a soft glow over her face, highlighting the faint scar on her jaw, the lines by her eyes. The music wrapped around us, slow and low. "You do not seem bothered," I said. "Most people freak out when the power goes." "I have lived through darker nights than this," she said quietly. Places where the dark meant gunfire and not Netflix failing. She did not say Syria. She did not have to. For a minute we just sat there, listening to the rain and the saxophone. "This song," she said after a while, nodding toward the speaker. It was his favorite. "Your husband?" I asked gently. She stared at the candle flame nearest us. "He was a photographer," she said. We would come back from a day in the field, dusty, exhausted, and play this. It made everything feel a little less broken. I watched her profile, the way her mouth tightened slightly, like she was holding back more words. "What do you listen to when things feel too heavy?" she asked. I let my head rest against the cabinet and thought about it. "Used to be punk rock," I said. "When I thought being angry meant I was alive. Now I just sit in silence. After my ex left, half my playlist felt like hers, so I stopped playing it." She nodded slowly. "Silence can feel safe," she said, "but it is also very loud when you are alone." We fell quiet again. The candlelight flickered between us. Then I felt it, her hand moving, searching, and then resting on top of mine. She did not grab. She did not squeeze. She just placed her hand over mine, warm and steady, like she was asking a question without saying it. "Sit closer," she said softly. I shifted, just a little, closing the space between us. Our shoulders brushed. She did not move away. My heart was beating faster than the rhythm of the music, but everything else felt strangely calm. The storm outside, the blackout, the empty street, all of it faded under the simple weight of her hand on mine. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She tilted her head toward me, eyes still on the candle. "Ask," quote. "Why do you keep letting me come here?" I asked. "Every day, using your Wi-Fi, taking your coffee. You barely knew me." She turned then, really looking at me. Her eyes were dark in the low light, but clear. "That first day," she said, "when you knocked with that lost puppy look and asked for Wi-Fi, you were so awkward it made me laugh." "Awkward?" I said, pretending to be offended. "Painfully," she said, and the corner of her mouth lifted. Then her face grew serious again. "I liked you right then, before you said more than 5 words. You felt honest." I swallowed, my throat dry. "Honest how?" "Like you were not trying to be anything more than what you are," she said. "I spent years around people who lied for a living. Politicians, spokesmen, cowards. After my husband died, I decided I was better off not needing anyone. Easier that way." She paused, her fingers tightening slightly over mine. "Then you keep knocking on my door with your stupid laptop and your bad French," she said. "You fix my light and my drawer without me asking. You read poetry like you are not afraid of it. And suddenly I am not so sure I want to be alone all the time." The words hit me hard. All at once it was too much, and not enough. "I thought I was just here for the Wi-Fi," I said quietly. She gave a soft breath that was almost a laugh. "You were," she said. "Now you are not." The jazz swelled, the saxophone bending around the silence between us. My hand turned under hers, our fingers threading together without either of us saying it out loud. She leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to move away. I did not. Her head rested lightly on my shoulder, her hair brushing my cheek, smelling like soap and something warm I could not name. "You do not have to say anything," she murmured. "I just wanted you to know." I did not have the right words anyway, so I stayed there, holding her hand, letting her weight rest against me. Time blurred. The candles burned lower, the storm kept talking to the windows. At some point my eyes closed. I do not know if I slept, not really, but I remember the feeling. Her breathing slow and steady next to me, her fingers still tangled with mine, the darkness around us no longer empty, no longer something to fear. For the first time since I moved into that building, the night did not feel like something I had to get through. It felt like something that was holding us together instead of pulling us apart. The power came back just before sunrise. I woke to a sudden low hum from somewhere in Eleanor's apartment. The fridge clicked on. The heater coughed. The candles on the counter were just pools of hardened wax now, little ghosts of last night. My neck hurt from sleeping sitting up. I was still on the kitchen floor, my back against a cabinet, The cushion half slid out from under me. The spot where her head had rested on my shoulder felt strangely cold. Eleanor was no longer beside me. I pushed myself up, joints stiff, and looked into the living room. She was curled on the couch under a blanket, one arm thrown over her eyes, hair a dark tangle over the pillow. For a second, it felt like I was looking at a version of her no one else saw. Not the sharp, quiet woman from the hall, not the rumor of the war reporter, just a person who had finally let herself be tired. I thought about waking her, saying something about coffee or the power or the fact that her head had been on my shoulder for half the night. Instead, I moved quietly, blowing out the last candle that still struggled near the sink. The sky outside the window was a dull gray. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, tapping lightly instead of pounding. I filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and found her coffee tin without having to look. I knew where she kept things now. It felt intimate in a way that had nothing to do with the dark. She stirred when the kettle started to whistle. Her arm dropped from her face. She blinked a few times, then focused on me at the counter. For a brief second she looked confused, like she did not remember how I was here. Then it clicked, and something in her expression softened. "Morning," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "Hey," I said. "Power is back. Coffee is almost ready." I hope that is not a war crime in this kitchen. Quote. She gave a small smile, sitting up and pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "You are improving," she said. "Your coffee attempts used to scare me." I poured 2 mugs and brought one over to her. Our fingers brushed when she took it. Neither of us jerked away, but the contact felt louder than it should have. We sat there for a minute. She on the couch, me in the chair opposite, both of us nursing hot coffee like it was armor. We did not talk about the candles. We did not talk about her hand on mine. We did not talk about her head on my shoulder, about the words she had said in the dark. "I liked you right then. You make me question not needing anyone." It all hovered between us in the space she left when she chose safer topics. "City will probably send some notice about the blackout," she said. "People will complain." "Yeah," I said. "You okay, though?" She looked at me over the rim of her mug. For a moment, her guard slipped again. "I am," she said quietly. "Last night was less lonely than it should have been." I swallowed, heat rising in my chest. "Same." Quote. Silence settled again, but it was not sharp. It just was. The kind of silence that comes when both people know there is more to say, but they are scared to say it wrong. I finished my coffee and set the empty mug on the table. "I should go shower," I said. "Try to make my place look like a human lives there before the power goes out again." She nodded, standing too, blanket slipping from her shoulders. "Thank you for checking on me," she said, "and for staying." "Anytime," I said, and I meant it more than she probably knew. I went to the door and opened it. The hallway felt colder than her kitchen. I stepped out, then turned back. For a second, we just looked at each other. Not neighbor and neighbor. Not kid next door, and myth with a camera on her shelf. Just Theo and Eleanor, standing in a doorway that suddenly felt like a border. "See you later?" I asked. "Depends," she said, the hint of a smile touching her mouth. "On your knocking skills." "Pretty sure you like those," I said. Her smile grew, just a little. "We will see." Quote, I walked back to my apartment, the short distance feeling longer than usual. My place was exactly how I had left it, slightly messy, slightly bare, completely mine, and somehow, after her candles and her jazz, completely empty. I reached for the doorknob and saw it was not empty at all. A small brown paper bag hung from the handle, tied with a thin piece of string. It swung slightly when I touched it. I took it inside, closing the door with my foot, and set the bag on the table. My stomach did a slow flip before I even opened it. I knew it was from her. It felt like her. Simple, neat, no extra decoration. Inside was a portable Wi-Fi hotspot, sleek and new. Not the cheap kind. The good kind. There was also a folded piece of paper. My name was written on the front, in that clean, slanted handwriting I had seen in the margins of her books. I unfolded it. "When you really want internet, knock 3 times." If you want me. Knock twice. E. I read it once, then again. The words blurred for a second, not because I did not understand them, but because I understood them too well. This was not just her being kind. This was her choosing. Choosing to let me in. Choosing to give me a way back, without another emergency, without a blackout, without me crashing through her door. My heart pounded hard enough that I could feel it in my fingers. I set the hotspot down on the table and stared at the note. The apartment around me buzzed with the low sound of things waking up after the outage, but it all faded under that one simple message. If you want me. I could pretend she was joking, that it was just her dry humor, her way of being playful. But I remembered the way her hand had tightened around mine, the way her voice had dipped when she talked about not wanting to need anyone, the way she had rested her head on my shoulder like it was the most dangerous and natural thing she had done in years. I did not want to pretend. I slipped the note into my hoodie pocket. My hand shook more than I wanted it to. I took one breath, then another, walked back out into the hall. The 10 steps to her door felt like a mile. Her doormat was there, plain and simple, just like always. The hallway light flickered once, then steadied. I could hear faint jazz through the door, the same kind of slow track she always played in the mornings. I stood there, staring at the wood, thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. She was older. She had lived through things I could not imagine. She had a whole life behind her, while I was still trying to figure mine out. She could shut me down, say it was a joke, decide she had opened up too far, and slam the wall back in place. But she had given me the choice. 3 knocks for work, 2 for her. My hand lifted. I knocked twice. There was a pause, long enough for my chest to tighten, long enough for me to almost convince myself to run back to my side and pretend I had just tested the sound. Then the lock clicked. The door opened. Eleanor stood there, barefoot in jeans and a soft white t-shirt, hair pulled back, a few strands loose around her face. No bathrobe this time. No shield except the small, tired, hopeful curve of her mouth. Her eyes dropped to my hand, still hovering in the air, then back to my face. "Took you long enough," she said quietly. My throat felt tight, but I managed a crooked smile. Had to make sure I counted right. She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in, Theo," she said. "This time, you really will not want to go back to your place." I crossed the threshold. The door closed behind me with a soft click, the same sound as always. But everything on the other side of it felt different. I did not know exactly what we were. I did not have a 5-year plan. I did not even know what tomorrow would look like. All I knew was this. The woman who once decided she did not need anyone had given me a key even if it was only to her Wi-Fi. The guy who thought he wanted a quiet, uncomplicated life had knocked twice. And for now, with her standing in front of me and the jazz starting up again somewhere in the background, that was enough.